What's going on, guys, and welcome back to your favorite YouTube channel, King Lister TV. It is Thursday night, so you know what that means. It is officially time for Troy's Thursday Talks, Episode 4, and it is Batman week here on the channel, so we are doing a Batman topic tonight. I'm pretty much just going to get into some of the reasons why I loved Batman as a kid, talk about what made me really drift to him as my favorite superhero, and then towards the end of this chat, man, I'm going to talk to you guys about what my idea as a Batman fan for a Batman trilogy of movies would be. If Warner Brothers were to get me on a phone and say, Troy, what do you want to see for a Batman trilogy? Write us some Batman movies. You know, of course, I didn't go into super detail, plot points and conversation pieces and stuff like that. But I just get, little notes to what my trilogy of what a Batman trilogy would look like. So we'll get to that later. But yes, it's Batman week. As I've told you guys all week long, Batman is my absolute favorite fictional character. It's my favorite comic book character, and it's been that way since I was a kid, man. I have just always really swayed towards Batman, and between him and any other hero, it's been Batman. The only other hero ever who's really been close to Batman was probably Spider-Man as a kid. Just being a 90s kid, man, Batman the animated series and Spider-Man the animated series were just, to me, the two best superhero cartoons of that decade. And I think that's probably the reason why I was such a big fan of each character. But, my oldest memories go as far back as watching, Adam West's 60s Batman TV show reruns with my grandmother late at night, just sitting there and watching the reruns. And I remember just being a kid and being infatuated with the pow and the bam and the, all the little pop up, with the sound effect words, that would pop up. And like I said, Batman the Animated Series, which came out in 1992. I was 2 years old when the animated series came out. So obviously, those two things are probably my earliest memories of Batman that I have. The 89 movie with Keaton and Nicholson, and directed by Burton, and then the follow-up Batman Returns, and then even Batman Forever and Batman Robin. I mean, I was 5 and 7 when those movies came out, so obviously I liked them then. As I got older, I realized they weren't great movies, but as a kid in the 90s, those were my movies. I have no what's the word I'm looking for? I have no regret in liking those films as kids. As a kid. It's Batman, and they were obviously marketed towards kids. They were very cartoonish, really marketed towards toys. I mean, the Batmobile was such a cool looking thing as a kid. I mean, that thing with with the lights on it. I mean, if you ever see Batman Forever or Batman Robin, you should definitely check them out. I mean, if you have kids, especially, watch it with your kids, because your kids will probably like them. It's not such a dark and serious and heavy films. Well, Batman Forever is a little darker, but Batman Robin especially is such a light-hearted and goofy, cheesy, over-the-top, campy movie that I think kids would love it. And obviously, my love for Batman continued in the early 2000s with, Batman Beyond, Justice League Unlimited, which are some of my favorite animated series. And then, of course, the Dark Knight trilogy. Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and then The Dark Knight Rises. To me, hands down, the greatest superhero trilogy. I don't think it's a question. I think it's the best superhero trilogy for an individual character. I can't compare it to the Avengers trilogy because we live in this post MCU world where Marvel has a stranglehold on not just the comic book world, maybe not just in comics, but at least in the movie industry, they really have a chokehold on it. And it's not just with against DC. It's every company now. Every studio wants to have their own connected universe. Everybody wants to have their things that intertwine and lead to a bigger crossover. I mean, even you look at Godzilla came out, and then they made King Kong again, and now they're gonna cross over next year with Godzilla versus King Kong, which is really cool. but there's been so many different, like, I think Universal Studios last year, or was it last year, when they rebooted The Mummy with Tom Cruise. That was supposed to be a start of the whole universe, the Dark Universe. It was going to be The Mummy and, the Invisible Man and Dracula and Frankenstein's monster and all those characters, the Wolfman and all those great legendary monster characters. They were going to bring them back and have their own connected universe. But, like I said, we're in this post. It's been done before. I mentioned in my Troy's top 5 that Marvel and DC both did it with their animated shows in the 90s, but it was never done to the scale of what the MCU did. The MCU changed the game. In 2008 they dropped Iron Man, and then they dropped Iron Man 2, and then Thor, and the Incredible Hulk, and Captain America, and then boom, the Avengers comes out in 2012, and it changes everything in the movies, man. I mean, now you think about it, yearly our summer blockbusters are comic book films. I mean, when did that, it used to be, big action flicks, or, romantic comedies, or thrillers and horrors, and those are the big things. But now it's every summer, every late spring, you're expecting a big comic book movie to come out, and there's been hits and misses for both studios. Obviously DC has been a little behind the curve, but that's no fault to Batman the character. I think individually speaking, Batman the character still has the best trilogy. Now, the Dark Knight trilogy was its own thing. It wasn't connected to any other heroes, but it was still, to me, the best trilogy of movies for a comic book character. I think Captain America trilogy is probably a second closest one. I think Batman Begins is a much better movie than the first Captain America, and I think as good as The Winter Soldier is as a movie, because The Winter Soldier, which is the second Captain America film, is a really, really good movie, but it's not better than a Dark Knight, so I give Batman the edge in those first two films. I do think that Captain America Civil War is probably a little better than The Dark Knight Rises, but Captain America Civil War, for a third movie in a superheroes trilogy, it's basically the Avengers 2.5, really. I mean, because every Avengers in the movie, except for Thor and the Incredible Hulk, but the rest are on there. I mean, you got Black Panther introduced in that movie. Spider-Man introduced in that movie. So to me, it's like, is Captain America Civil War really a Captain America movie? I mean, I know it's based around Captain America and his friendships with both Bucky and Tony, which is a big thing, but like, Civil War is a huge Marvel storyline. That's like if you made a third Batman film, I don't know, like Crisis on Infinite Earths or something really ridiculous, like a huge story arc in the comics that you took your third Batman story and made it into something like that. It just, as a standalone set trilogy for one character, I think the Batman trilogy, the Dark Knight trilogy, is still the top, the upper echelon. And I don't think it's close, really. You can look at the original X-Men trilogy, which had two very good films, but the third one was terrible. The same thing with the original Spider-Man trilogy. Tobey Maguire was Spider-Man. Spider-Man 1 was good. Spider-Man 2 was great. Spider-Man 3 let a lot of people down. So you look at these trilogies, Thor trilogy doesn't come close. The Iron Man trilogy doesn't come close. And Iron Man's a cool character, but, Iron Man... his movies weren't that good. The movies weren't that. I mean, Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of Tony Stark is legendary. It's iconic, but the movies aren't that good. The Avenger movies are good, and he's great in the Avengers movies, and he's great in the Iron Man movies, but the movies are not that good. Iron Man 1's really good, but 2 and 3 are so at best. So yeah, I think it's for sure. And then Superman, on the DC side, Superman doesn't really have a trilogy that can stand up against it. Wonder Woman only has one film under her belt so far. Looking forward to next year's second one, so we'll see what that goes. But again, yeah, the Dark Knight trilogy is, to me, still the best Batman or best superhero trilogy we've seen, and I think that was probably the peak of my love for Batman. I told you all the things I watched of Batman growing up, and when that came out, I was 15 when Batman Begins came out, 18 when The Dark Knight came out, and then 22 when The Dark Knight Rises came out. And that's like when my Batman love really was cemented for good. Like there's no going back on it at that point. I mean, obviously, everybody knows, Batman is, he's cool, he's dark, he's edgy, he has the cool car and the cool plane and the cool gadgets, and he can fight, and he's, super kick ass and all those great things, but to me, it was always that Batman was just super relatable. He just was a super relatable character, and, how can you relate to a character like Thor or Superman? Or even Wonder Woman. You try to make these characters relatable, but can you really, really, truly connect to them? Because they're aliens, or they're basically gods. Even if you look at the X-Men, they're mutants, and there's supposed to be parallels. The mutants, were created, to be parallels to the civil rights movement, which is really cool, I think. But that's when you're reading a comic. If you look at it at face value, how could you connect to a guy with adamantium claws coming out of his hands? Like, that's really difficult to really connect to, really, in a relatable sense. Whereas Batman, he is a human, he has no powers, he uses just his will, his body, his intellect, he uses his God-given abilities, and a shitload of money. Obviously, he's a billionaire, which is probably the most unrelatable thing about Batman, is the fact that he is a billionaire. But he's somebody who had, you look at his origin, his parents being shot in front of him, that trauma that happens to him at a young age. We, living our lives, a lot of people go through trauma. A lot of people experience things that, can, alter their mental state. People deal with anxiety and depression and all different kinds of issues, from a mental health standpoint, that I think Batman is such a prime example of that, really, because if you look at it, Batman is just as mentally damaged. I should say, mentally, his mental health is just as questionable as the villains he faces. Really, I mean, the guy dresses up in a bat costume and runs around with no powers and fights criminals. That's, you got to be kind of a little off to, or dealing with some kind of issue to make you do that. But there's a line that he won't cross, and he never allows himself. He has the strength mentally to never allow himself to really fall too deep into it. I mean, and Batman can be brutal, and he can get rough, but he for the most part, he's never allowed himself to really slip into that dark abyss that comes with certain kind of trauma. Unlike his villains, who, again, a lot of his villains have super tragic backstories. There's a reason why his Rogues Gallery is so good, because they're so fleshed out. But a lot of them have, they don't deal with the trauma as well as he did. They fall down to the dark abyss. So it's just such a from a human, just a person standpoint, you can kind of resonate with Batman. This guy loses his parents, he's alone, and he just has this need to, never want what happened to him to happen again. And I just always loved his origin, his story, and his mission. His mission to rid the to be, justice, and to rid the world of the senseless acts of violence, at least in the city, of Gotham. Again, to never let happen to a kid what happened to him. That's just such a great thing, and even the idea that anyone could be Batman, this is something that's really heavily pushed in the Dark Knight trilogy, because the Dark Knight trilogy is so based in realism, and it really pushes the idea that Batman could be more than just a person. It could be a symbol for to do better, to really and inspire people to do better. Even inspires the I can't think of his character name. They said they revealed it as Robin, but it was played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt in the third film, and he inspires him to become Batman, or we assume Batman in the end of the movie, the end of the trilogy. So it's really the idea of anyone could be Batman. If you just you train yourself to your max limits. It helps obviously be a billionaire, because you have to be rich to have all the Batman gadgets. That's why I think, to me, if there's any hero who could rival Batman in relatability, it's probably Spider-Man. Spider-Man's the only hero I think who could probably top Batman in true relatability. You know, he's a human, and he's a young kid actually when he starts becoming a hero. Obviously, he has superpowers, but because he gets bit by a spider and yada yada, if you know the story. But he also has trauma that happens to him, and he learns that with this power comes responsibility. But you know his struggles. You know his you can't maybe relate to Spider-Man, but you can relate to Peter Parker. You know, just a kid who's grown up in high school and then college, and he doesn't have a lot of money, and he loses his uncle. He lost his parents when he was a kid, loses his uncle, and he lives with his aunt, and he's just trying to get by and figure out life, and that's what everybody's trying to do on this planet, is just try to figure out life. So I think Spider-Man's the only hero who could top Batman in relatability, but I think they're 1 and 2 for relatability for me. I mean, you look at someone like Captain America. Cap's a human too, but Cap's a soldier from World War II, or a superhuman soldier from World War II who's trapped in time, and you can relate to him a little bit, but not fully the same way you can Batman and Spider-Man. I just think when you have those basic human qualities where you're just kind of, when you're stripped down, you're just who you are. I think that makes you really relatable. That's why I think Batman has always been super relatable. I've always really clung on to him. And just I made the joke one time that I was super scared of the movie It when I was a kid. I saw the movie It and it scared the hell out of me, and I never really liked clowns. And I always said Batman was my favorite hero because his main villain was a clown, the Joker, and he beats his ass all the time. So maybe I was a kid and I saw that and it kind of just stuck with me. But I just always liked Batman, man, and I just always been a fan. I've seen every Batman movie you can think of, anime movie, live action. I think the only TV shows. I think the only Batman anime movie I haven't seen yet is the anime one is the Batman Ninja film, which I don't know why I haven't seen it yet. I just haven't sat down and watched it yet, but I'll eventually check it out. But anyways, guys, let's get into the meat and potatoes of what we're doing here tonight on Troy's Dirty Talks. It is Batman week, obviously. I've spent the first 20 minutes of this talking about Batman, so you clearly get that. But we're going to hop into... I was thinking, I've always thought about what I would want to do if I had the opportunity to, make a Batman trilogy or make a movie. I've always wanted to write a movie, but specifically a Batman trilogy. I mean, that'd be awesome. I mean, like, somebody get Warner Bros. On the phone. Tell him King Lister is on line 1 and he's ready to, he's ready to make this Batman thing popping out here. Let's catch up to the MCU. Hire me. I'm your guy. Let's get this going, man. But yeah, so if it was up to me, these are some of my general ideas of what my Batman trilogy would look like, okay? And I'll start with this. It's going to be 4 movies. A trilogy, but 4 movies, because the third one would be 2 parts. So part 1 and part 2. I personally think Batman would benefit from a TV show. I would love to see them do like a how Netflix has Daredevil, like a live action show like that, like on with a higher budget, where they can really do some things, because Batman has so many good villains and stories that sometimes I feel like they need to be fleshed out more than what you do in a movie. You look at The Dark Knight Rises, for example. I felt that movie would have been beneficial if it was 2 parts. It would have benefited so much more, because you could have built up to him fighting Bane and then have him get his back broken, and that could have been the end of the first movie. You really could have built that up. And then the second movie could have been him recovering and getting his way back to Gotham to save the city and stuff. But it just felt so rushed and just like crammed when you watch it, when it's just one movie with so much going on. But I just think that Batman could benefit from more time, more screen time. I mean, sign me up. Many Batman movies, shows you want to make, I'll be there for them, so sign me up. But yeah, so my trilogy would be 4 movies, because the third one would be 2 parts. Okay, so the movie 1 would start off, Batman would be around 30 years old, sort of like they're going to do with the Robert Pattinson trilogy. He'd be around 30. He would be Batman for about 2 years to this point. He would already have, taken out organized crime, the Falcone and Maroni families. He would already have, tried to get rid of some of that corruption in the Gotham City Police Department. He would already have done some things like that. Now, he still wouldn't be loved by the people, embraced. He would still be sort of seen as a myth. The police would see him as a vigilante. Probably the only person on his side would probably be Commissioner Gordon. Obviously, the usual suspects. Alfred would be in the movie. I wouldn't show his parents being killed. We've seen that. Everybody knows Batman's parents got killed in the alleyway. You don't need to see it again. Maybe have Batman or Bruce reference it in the beginning. It could be like, I don't know, 20 years since his parents got killed, and it's in a paper or something, and he's reading it to Alfred, and he kind of just reminisces on the moment and kind of reinstills that mission in his head. You know what I mean? But also taking out organized crime over his first 2 years as Batman, but also maybe some minor villains. Nothing major. Maybe something like Toy Man or Calendar Man or the Clock King. The Electrocutioner, characters like that who aren't, these are just, little toss away villains, from a, random comic book or, a random episode of the anime series, or, if you ever watch like the CW shows on, the hero shows like Arrow, Flash, Supergirl, they have, weekly villains, like those villains who aren't major villains, but weekly characters that, you could throw in, maybe show a little thing of Batman, stopping them, or make references to him stopping them. So, that I think for the first movie, my big bad would be like Black Mask. Black Mask is a villain who is a criminal mastermind, and he takes control of organized crime in the city. Maybe after Batman, takes out the mafia, the mob, whatever, and he ends organized crime, Black Mask swoops in, and he's a little more violent, a little more vicious, a little more theatrical, like Batman in a way. His Black Mask, he would take over the organized crime. He would hire somebody, and it would start, him and Batman would start a war. So that would become Batman's main focus would become, take down Black Mask, and Black Mask would then in return hire somebody to be his hired gun, if you will, to take out Batman. And there would be the second villain of the film, which would be, some like Deadshot from Suicide Squad, which Will Smith played Deadshot, the lethal assassin, lethal shot. Or I would love to see Deathstroke. Deathstroke is a awesome villain in the DC universe. He was originally a Teen Titans villain. He's a former military guy who was great in combat and stuff like that. Marksman, and he gets a little bit of some superhuman juice to him. Sort of like Captain America in a way, if you will. He has a little bit, superhuman strength. He's just a little bit stronger, a little bit faster, than your normal everyday person walking down the street. And maybe Black Mask hires Deathstroke to, he hires a contract. I want you to kill Batman for me. And then the movie, you get some great fight scenes between Batman and Deathstroke. Some awesome stuff you could do. But ultimately Batman would take down Deathstroke and take down Black Mask, and the first movie would end on a very high note for Batman. He'd be embraced by the people of Gotham a little bit. I mean, he's never going to be Superman style embraced, but he wouldn't be this. He wouldn't be feared by the citizens of Gotham, and the police would still want to take him down because he's a vigilante, but they would be a little more tolerant of him. He'd be no longer truly a myth. Like, people would know Batman maybe exists. Movie number 2 would hop in about probably about a year later in the story. I would open this movie. I would open if this was the second Batman film. I would open this with a kick-ass fight scene. I'm talking awesome fight scene, and it could be Batman taking down a medium tier villain, not one of his upper echelon guys, and not one of those throwaways, but someone who's in the middle, somebody who is formidable, like a Killer Croc or Man Bat, somebody like that, who would be second tier. Calls Batman a couple of nights of probably frustration, and then the opening scene would be the final fight between Batman and this we'll say B-level hero or villains, excuse me, and he would take them down, and that's how you would start off the second film, and then you would notice a year later or whatever. I would take the second movie to introduce Robin, Dick Grayson, the first Robin. I would do his origin in this movie. You could have Bruce. Oh, wow! I forgot to say, in the first movie, I would have totally introduced Catwoman. Selena Kyle, aka Catwoman, would have been introduced in the first movie she would be Catwoman, but she wouldn't be a main villain or ally yet. She would just kind of be a character who's in these movies. She would kind of play the love interest role for Bruce in the trilogy. They would kind of have this on again, off again, flirtatious, maybe hook up, maybe not hook up, maybe, they would just go back and forth, and they would constantly play will they, won't they type of thing with them throughout the trilogy. So she would be around. So, but yes, again, so maybe you do Robin's origin in number 2. Dick Grayson was was in the circus, and he was part of his family was the Flying Graysons. They did all that stuff, and his parents get killed by a mobster who was owed money by the guy who ran the circus, and you can do the whole origin, and maybe Bruce, he sees this kid, sees it happen to this kid, he takes him in. Bruce is trying to help him, all while keeping the secret he's still Batman. But maybe Dick is just so angry and he really wants to get revenge for his parents, and maybe he starts snooping around and he finds out his parents got killed by this mobster, whatever, and he goes to confront this mobster, and maybe Dick gets himself in over his head and he's in trouble. Bruce puts it together. Bruce comes in and saves him as Batman, of course, and then Bruce would maybe reveal to him who he is and take him under his wing. I wouldn't do a young boy Robin. I'm not trying to do a 10-year-old. I don't think you could take a 10-year-old kid and put him in a movie and have him fight crime. Maybe 16, 17, around that timeline. That junior year in high school type of thing, where it's a little more okay to put this kid in gunfights, against villains, than you would, a 10-year-old kid or something like that. But yeah, I would do that. This could all happen over the first half of the film, and while that's going on, the other part of the movie, the first half, you could have the Joker as your villain. Joker's the villain in the second film, but you could introduce him in the first half of the film and just have stuff happening, while Bruce is dealing with the after the opening fight scene, you realize a year later, and you realize the Joker's terrorizing the city. He's committing crime at the crime, and Batman and Gordon on the case. The Robin thing happens, his origin, and Bruce is trying to deal with that in his personal life, and then as Batman, we're always just trying to figure out, how to stop the Joker, but he can't, because he's pulled apart, and the Joker threat is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then eventually, Bruce takes, Dick in, starts training him to become Robin, and, he gets baptized by fire, man. His first, mission is going to be, we got to stop the Joker. Batman and Robin are officially on the case. Maybe the Joker has a side villain who is helping him out, someone for Robin to fight. I was thinking about villains, who could play that role. I thought about Toyman again. I thought Anarchy. Anarchy is a minor villain in the Batman mythos. Who I don't even know much about Anarchy overall. They did a live action version of him on the show Arrow, which was lackluster. I've seen him a couple times in animated films and video games. But you could have Anarchy be a side villain, someone who he wants to create chaos too, just like the Joker. So Joker maybe manipulates him to help him out, and maybe you can make this kid maybe 17, 18, around the same age as Robin. So when, the big fights happen, the climactic battle at the end, maybe Robin's, fighting some goons and Anarchy while Batman fights the Joker. Ultimately, Batman and Robin will save the day and, defeat Anarchy and the Joker and send Joker off to Arkham. Which now leads us to the third movie. The third movie would probably skip a few years. I'm thinking, I don't want to go too much, but I'm thinking three years maybe. Batman and Robin have been at it now for about 3 years, and they've been kicking ass and just being the dynamic duo. But you would see early on in this film that there's starting to kind of be a little bit of rift between them. Maybe after taking down another, C-list villain, you start to see that, Robin, if you know the story about Batman Robin, the first Robin, Dick Grayson, he starts to kind of get a little tired of Bruce's way of fighting crime. Dick wants to do his own thing. He's a little more lighthearted than Bruce, and he's not as, he doesn't want to be as dark as Bruce is, and you can start to maybe build that rift and show there's some tension between the two, and maybe he talks about wanting to do things on his own, whatever. But yeah, you would show that rift a little bit, but they've been the dynamic doing that for 3 years, and they've been fighting crime together side by side, and they are the world's best team. I would then take this film to introduce Ra's al Ghul, Ra's al Ghul, the leader of the League of Assassins. In this film, he would be the big bad in this movie. Ra's al Ghul's whole thing is the League of Assassins are a ancient, what's the word I'm looking for? An ancient group organization that's that stays in the shadows and basically causes havoc, destruction. But they see it as they're saving the world. He wants to burn something down to rebuild it back up. That's his whole mantra, his whole idea. A lot of times in the story, Ra's already knows that Bruce Wayne is Batman. He is very smart. He figures out who he is, but he wants Bruce to take over for him. He doesn't really want to kill Bruce. He wants Bruce to take his spot. Ra's is an ancient evil himself. He keeps himself alive through the Lazarus pits usually, which bring him back to life. But he, at this point, he wants to retire. He wants his legacy to continue through Bruce and his daughter Talia. So you introduce Ra's and Talia, and Ra's would want to try to convince Bruce to give up the Batman mantle and take his mantle as the Demon's head and lead the League of Assassins, marry his daughter Talia, have a kid, and continue the legacy. Bruce, obviously, Batman would never do that, so there would be a back and forth there, maybe some little minor battles and scuffles, all while still Batman and Robin are having issues. Maybe Robin decides to go out one night on his own to try to stop a plot that's going on from the League of Assassins, and Ra's kidnaps him and takes him, and this forces Bruce to go after them to save Dick, and he goes after them, and it leads to the climax of the movie. Where Bruce comes in and he foils Ra's al Ghul's plans, and he defeats him, and he beats on a bunch of assassins from the League of Assassins, and he saves Robin, and all is well. However, this movie would also see Robin officially leave his role as Robin. Dick Grayson would leave Batman. He would be thankful for it. They would come to a common understanding. But Dick at this point would be in his early 20s, and he has to go out and be his own man, and he would leave the Robin identity behind him, and he would move on. Okay, and two small things I would do in this movie. I would introduce Barbara Gordon, Jim Gordon, Detective Gordon's daughter, who is Batgirl, but I wouldn't introduce her as Batgirl. I would just introduce her as Barbara Gordon in this movie. You can do that in a couple small scenes, nothing crazy. That's what I would do with that. And I would also show the beginning stages of the Harley Quinn and Joker relationship. You could focus on the Joker in Arkham. You could have a couple scenes where you just show these two. He basically, she's kind of whacked out, and he kind of makes her fall in love with him in this. When he's in Arkham, she's his psychiatrist, and she falls in love with him. You could show this as a subplot of this third film, and eventually maybe almost like a after credit scene show Harley Quinn breaking the Joker out of Arkham, and they escape together. Okay, so part 2 of the third film would continue maybe 6 months after the first part. And, it would all be about Batman trying to hunt down the Joker and Harley. Harley helps him escape, in the very end of the film. And, he is tracking them down. They're causing all kinds of little problems for Batman all over the city, all over Gotham. But he just can't nab them. He's on his own now. He's after 2 of them. The Joker's a little smarter. He's just really trying to track them down. But, he's having a hard time getting them, tracking them down. This is where I would introduce Batgirl. Barbara Gordon would take the Batgirl identity on herself, and she would start trying to fight crime herself. And Batman would have multiple interactions with her in the beginning of the movie, and he would refuse her help because he doesn't want another partner. And she would try to stick around, and she would always put her nose in his business whatever. But he'd be unwilling to really have her help. I would also take time to show what Dick Grayson's been doing. He is now Nightwing. He is no longer Robin. Once he gets the Robin title up, he does become Nightwing. I would show that too. So you have all these things going on. You have Batman tracking down the Joker and Harley, but he can't get to him. And you have Batgirl trying to help him out, but he doesn't want her help. And you show Robin, aka now Nightwing, grown and doing his own thing. And he's trying to do his own thing. And you have all these things happening. I would then bring back Talia al Ghul, because I would probably have her dad, Ra's al Ghul, die in the first part. And I would bring back Talia. And she would go to the Joker and Harley, and they would form an alliance. She would back them up with her. She would not be controlling the League of Assassins, and she would pretty much say, look, me, controlling the League of Assassins, and you two, we can take down Bruce or Batman for good. And they would start a plan to do that. Some point in this movie, she would realize she can't control the Joker and Harley. They're uncontrollable. They're nuts, and she would start losing control of them a little bit, and plans would start going awry. She would start losing it. Well, lo and behold, guess what? Surprise, surprise, Ra's al Ghul is still alive. He was resurrected from Lazarus Pit, but he's been in hiding and kind of recovering and recuperating, and now he's back, and he steps his foot down, and now he takes control of the situation, and him, Talia, Joker, and Harley, the League of Assassins, they would now devise a plan to take down Batman, and this is where Catwoman from the first film, who's been in the second film and the third film, and now this one, she's been his love interest the whole time, as a subplot of all these movies. They would kidnap her, and they would try to kill her, basically to convince Bruce to come after them. All this would take place at Arkham Asylum. That is, to me, a great place to have a final battle for a Batman story. You could have small cameos from other villains that you've seen in the other movies. You could have reference to other villains we haven't seen. Maybe, some minor fights. But it would all come down to eventually Batman, Nightwing, and Batgirl teaming up as a get together and form the Bat family and going into Arkham to basically face Joker, Harley, Ra's, Talia, and the League of Assassins, and maybe some other minor villains thrown in, and you would just get, the last part of this movie, the third act, would just be basically non-stop fight scenes all the way through Arkham until you get to the end, where eventually, the good guys will prevail, as always, because, it's a Batman story. But yeah, that would be my idea for a trilogy, because I've always wanted to see, I want to see Batman and Robin on the big screen again together. Like I said, the first Batman and Robin movie, they weren't good movies, so I would love to see them, have a chance at it again. Batgirl would be awesome. I really want to see the Bat family. I love Batman, but I do love the extended characters too. All the Robins, I wish I could have worked in, Jason Todd or Tim Drake's Robin, but that's so difficult to, in a 4 movies, but, it's like 3 stories in 4 movies. It's really, really hard to work that in, but those would be my ideas. Those would be my ideas of what I would want to do for a Batman trilogy. Eventually, maybe at the end, he saves Catwoman, and maybe they finally decide, let's be together. Maybe she joins. She leaves all her criminal shenanigans behind her, and she finally gives in and joins Bruce in his fight. And they work together. Because that's the Bat and the Cat is a great love story. So yeah, those would be my ideas for a movie, man. I just want to see as many villains and as many. It's hard, with movie. That's why I said, TV show would be so much better. But they can do things with that in movies now. Not every villain needs a huge, backstory. Like Joker doesn't need a backstory. Really, he doesn't. You think about The Dark Knight. There was no backstory for Heath Ledger's Joker. You just see him, and that's it. They don't know his name, where he came from, how he became who he is. You don't need that stuff, man. If you do it right, if it's written well and it's thought out, and you have this thing, planned out well, you don't need it. So, but yeah, okay, guys. So that is, tonight's topic for Troy's Daily Talks. What my Batman trilogy would look like. Why I've always been a big fan of Batman. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope maybe you learned something about Batman. I hope that Batman Week has made you guys go and watch some classic Batman movies and check some stuff out. If you like this video, please like, comment, share, subscribe. You guys know the deal. hit the notification button so you get notified when I drop a new video. Batman week is not over. There is still the weekend still of Batman week. I do plan on doing a couple more choice top fives, and if I can get my buddy over here over the weekend, maybe me and him will just have a, record just a conversation talking about Batman and other superhero stuff, man. But if he comes here, I gotta talk some wrestling with him. But anyways, that's besides the point. That's later on. But thank you guys for tuning in tonight, man. I hope you guys have a great evening. And as always, too sweet.